That's just the song for a morning like this. He lives. And it's the right message for what we're going to be studying today, because what we're studying today is pretty grim, isn't it? But we know the end of the story. We know, as I've said before, and I'll say many times again, God's intended last word is never judgment. God's intended last word is hope. And that's the word that we hear in this song. He lives in my heart. Well, lest I forget, let me give you your homework for tomorrow. Tomorrow, by the grace of God, we'll be looking at chapters 12 through 17. 12 through 17. So please read those sometime today. And as I said on Saturday, I guess it was, read it with a pencil. Look for those repeated words, repeated phrases. Look for connective words, but, because, since, for, if, then. And read with your mind open. A year has passed between the end of chapter 7 and the beginning of chapter 8. Came to pass in the 6th year, in the 6th month. The previous visions, Ezekiel's call, and then the messages that came immediately after that we looked at yesterday in 4 through 7, they all seem to have come just right about at the same time. In that 5th year of their exile, 593, in Ezekiel's 30th year, the year when he would have entered the priesthood. Now a year and a couple of months has passed. It's September a year later, and another vision comes to him. I think we can understand how in Ezekiel's living with God and his attempting to understand what God is saying to him, God has impressed upon him that something has to be done to sort of break through this veneer of false optimism and to help the people to see what the real condition is. And so these 4 chapters, again, are a unit. As I was saying yesterday, this is a more literary book than the other prophets. The other prophets, you tend to have little snippets that are collected together. But here in Ezekiel, you have large ideas that are given to us in a larger unit. And so that's what we have here in chapters 8 through 11. Now, if you're taking notes, let me give you the outline. If I can find my notes, yes. Let me give you the outline of these chapters. The general title that I would give to them is here we are, yes. God abandons his temple. God abandons his temple. As I said on Friday, there's the sense among the people that as long as we got the temple, everything's okay. The temple is God's house. The temple is where he lives, the place where he's connected. And as long as that place exists, everything is fine. And so Ezekiel understands, under the teaching of the Spirit, we've got to show them that the temple itself means nothing to God. God doesn't care about stones and metal and fabric and that sort of stuff. What God cares about is the human soul. And so God destroys, God abandons his temple. Chapter 8, and that would be, again, that would be capital B, God abandons his temple. And then number 1 under that, the temple is defiled by humans. Chapter 8. Humans have made this thing filthy and disgusting to God. Number 2, the temple is defiled by God. Chapter 9. God says, you've made the temple filthy. Well, now I'm going to make it filthy. And I'll make it filthy by filling it with dead bodies. Number 8, chapter 8. The temple is defiled by humans. Chapter 9. The temple is defiled by God. And then, number 3, under B, God removes his glory. Chapters 10 and 11. And 3 subdivisions there. Lowercase a, 10:1 to 11:12. Where is the glory? Now maybe you remember, and I better say this now lest I forget it later in the rush of time. You remember that when the ark was taken by the Philistine army and the word came back, the ark is gone. The cry in Hebrew was, "E kavod." A means where, and kavod is glory. Ichabod. Where is the glory? So, lowercase a, 10:1 to 11:12, where is the glory? Lowercase b, 11:13 to 21, hope for a remnant. Yes, as this sort of unremitting picture of gloom and terror and destruction weighs in upon Ezekiel, Ezekiel cries out in intercession, "Oh God, are you going to destroy everything and everybody?" Really, this is the second time in the section that occurs. But this second time, God says, "Oh no, Ezekiel, no, there will be a remnant." And so, 11:13 to 21, hope for a remnant. And then the final little segment, lowercase c, 11:22 to 24, the glory departed. Yes, there is hope for the future, but for the present, the word is unremittingly grim. The glory is gone. God abandons his temple. Again comes the vision of the man. Chapter 8. See it there? I was sitting with the elders of Judah, and the hand of the Lord fell upon me. I looked, and there was a likeness like the appearance of fire from the waist downward, fire from the waist upward, like the appearance of brightness, like the color of amber. God breaking into our lives. God breaking into our experience in our own terms. And yet, he's the man of fire. And he seizes Ezekiel by the hair. And he says, "The Spirit lifted me up." The Spirit is the agent of God in the world. You see that emerging in the Old Testament, and it continues with more and more definition in the New. The Spirit is the divine energy in the world. He's the one who moves Ezekiel. And he is the key to revelation. If you're going to know God, the only way you're ever going to know him is through the Spirit of God enabling you to do that. And that idea is here as the Spirit lifts him up. The Spirit carries him away to Jerusalem. And ultimately the Spirit will bring him back to the place where he is there in Babylon. The Spirit, the divine energy in the world, God's divine agent, and the key to revelation. There is, as he lands there in the temple, a certain sense of progression. Now remember how the temple was structured. It faced east, and there was first of all a set of walls which closed in the outer courtyard. And there were gates in the east, in the north, and in the south of that wall. You came into the outer courtyard, and you saw another set of walls. Again, a gate in the east, a gate in the south, a gate in the north. And if you went into that inner courtyard, then you were looking at the temple. You were looking at the east front of the temple, and there was the altar, the laver, and then the door to the Holy of Holies. And so the Spirit brings Ezekiel into the outer court, and he is looking at the north gate to the inner court, where the temple itself stood. Now this was the way the king entered the temple. He came through the north gate of the outer court and on through to the inner gate. And what is it that Ezekiel sees standing right there, right outside the north gate to the inner court? The image which provokes jealousy. What a fascinating, fascinating description. The image that makes God jealous. The image that breaks God's heart. This is my house. This is my place. This is the place where my love lives. And what do I find here? An image. An image. Very probably, this is the image of Asherah, the mother goddess. Manasseh, we are told, had set up an image of Asherah. Josiah had torn it down and smashed it and burned it. Now it appears that Jehoiakim, Josiah's son, has re-erected this Asherah right there. As you go in that door to the temple building, there stands the mother goddess. God says it breaks my heart. The king is promoting this idea. Now, why can't we describe God as mother? What's wrong with that? Is there something divine about fatherhood and not divine about motherhood? No. The Bible teaches us that all that is good about males and females is found in God. God is all in all. God is not a man. Hear me. God is not a male. Well, you say, then why did the Bible describe him exclusively as father? Once or twice he's said to be like a mother, but he's never said to be mother. Why is it that he is regularly defined with masculine pronouns? If God isn't a man, if God isn't male, then why do this? The answer, I believe, is involved in the very character of transcendence. Big word, transcendence. But it means that God is other than his creation. He is not the world. He is not this wood. He is not this earth. He is not these trees. He is not this flesh. God is other than the world. The instant you begin to think that God is the world, magic takes over. I can manipulate the world. I can do things to the world. I can make it do what I want. Surrender is lost. But if God is not the world, then the only way I can relate to him is through surrender and trust. I can't make him do a thing. If God is the world, then there's no hope of salvation, because God is me and God is as messed up as I am. All you can do is actualize what you are. That's salvation in modern psychological terms. Self-actualization. Well, dear Lord, if that's all salvation is, this is a very dark world. If all I can do is be more of me, I'm in trouble. But if God is not the world, if God transcends the world, then God can break into this world and transform it. He can transform me. He can transform you. Oh, he's not going to make us into somebody else. But he can take what is good in us and bring it to flower, and he can do away with what is evil in us. Praise his name. Now, what happens if you begin to describe God as mother? Where did we come from? Oh, we emerged from God. You cannot separate a child and a mother. For 9 months, they have been one flesh. The instant you begin to describe God as mother, you lose the doctrine of transcendence. It happens every time. The instant you begin to describe God as mother, then mother is one with me, and I am one with mother. The radical feminists know this, and that's why they hate transcendence. They hate it. You read their writings and you see it again and again and again. Oh yes, God is mother. God is me. I emerged from God. We are one. And I can manipulate mother and get what I want. You may want to talk about that more with me. It's a complex subject. But I believe this is the reason why the Bible is so careful. No, God is not a man. God is not male. But we've got to describe God in language we can come to grips with. You certainly couldn't describe God as it. He's a person. You've got to describe him in personal terms. You can't describe him as he, she. That's not a person, that's a monster. So you've got to be exclusively he or exclusively she. And your choices are laid out in front of you very, very clearly. And I say again, those who are arguing that we ought to call God mother have an agenda. And their agenda is to destroy the doctrine of transcendence and make God this world. So there is the king establishing the mother goddess right there. But God says to Ezekiel, you think that's bad? I can show you something worse. And he showed him over here a hole in the wall of the inner court. And he said, dig that hole. And he dug through, and lo and behold, there was a hidden doorway. He said, go through that doorway. So he is now in the inner court, and between the temple and that wall, along the sides of the temple, were the priest's quarters. Here is a hidden doorway right from the outer court into the priest's quarters in the inner court. And what do we find there? We find a pornographic art show. 70 of the elders of Israel in a dark room, and all over the wall are these horrifying pictures. Animals, humans, everything you can imagine, and a whole lot of stuff you can't imagine. Right in the priest's chamber with the elders of the nation. Why is it that around the world, when nations lose their way, even unbelieving nations that may have begun with some sense of order and law and direction, when they lose their way, why is it that pornography becomes rampant? Again, this is a big subject. We don't have long to talk about it. But I believe it's this. Of all of our drives, the sexual drive is the one that is most complex, that most involves our whole psyche, our whole self-understanding. And when we've lost our way, when life has lost its purpose and lost its meaning, when we've lost direction, this drive, this desire, this complexity in us begins to emerge and to fill our horizon. Domination, control, pleasure, mystery, all of these things begin to grow and grow and grow. And of course you know that God has made us so that no pleasure can ever give the same jolt the second time that it gave the first time. Have you discovered that? I was thinking last night, as Billy was talking about places, of an experience. I don't know how old I was. I suppose I was 13 or 14. I was a loner as a child. I wandered through the woods and through the creeks, floating sticks down the creeks, and I was a couple of miles from home, and I climbed up through a hill where I'd never been before, and I came to the top and caught my breath, because there was a valley laid out before me, and up the other side of the hill was a gorgeous red barn with tall silos and a lovely farmhouse. I'd been to that place before, but I'd been to that house, that farm, but I'd never seen that vista. And I was just enraptured by the beauty of it. Never dreamed that there was such a beautiful sight so near home. A week later, I went back, expecting to get the same jolt. And I climbed up the hill and came to the clearing, and there it was, just like I'd seen it before, but why pornography? Why kinky sex? Why? Oh, because normal sex, if you're after a jolt, you can't get the same jolt the second time. This is a delicate subject, and I'll try to be careful. Thank God for normal sex between a man and a woman who love each other and are absolutely free with each other. Thank God. But if you're after a jolt, if you're not after knowing your lover, if you're not after giving yourself away and finding yourself in the love of another, if you're after a jolt, you can't get the same jolt twice. And so, more perverse, more strange, more odd, more terrible. It's a funny thing about sexuality. And again, this is delicate, but I think we've got to talk about it. For men, we males want the act of sex. Women, if I dare to speak for women, I believe are not so interested in the act of sex. They are interested in being sexually attractive. So every man in his perverse lostness really believes that every woman wants to be raped. And every woman in her perverse lostness wants to exert a fatal attraction on every male that walks in her orbit and then be able to say, don't touch. And we do this to each other. And so, pornography grows around us into a multi-billion-dollar industry. And God says it is an abomination. In a congregation this size, there are people here who need to ask God, what about my sexuality? God says, I'll show you something worse. Come on back out here. Come on back out through the north gate of the inner court, out through the outer court. I want to take you to the north gate of the outer court. Yes, the king is corrupted. Yes, the elders are corrupted. But if the women of a nation can have pure affection toward God, there is hope. 25 years ago, I wrote a paper for Good News about the roles of men and women. I'm still licking my wounds over that one. But I still believe what I said there. And that is, first of all, men and women are different. Have you figured that out yet? If you haven't, see me afterwards. We don't function the same way. You know the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and there's a lot of truth to it. We don't function the same way. Men, now again, I'm talking generalities. Men tend to be the dreamer, the visionary, the driver, the dynamic. We've done it once, we're tired of it. Let's try something else. Women tend to be the preservers, the connectors. Oh, how badly we need each other. I'm not saying for a moment that there are not women who are more drivers, more dynamic, more dreamers, more darers than a bunch of men. And I'm not saying that there aren't a lot of men who are the connectors, who are the preservers, who are the builders. But I'm talking about overlapping circles. And I'm saying most women are here and most men are there. And so, if that feminine sensitivity, if that feminine care for connecting things and putting them together and holding them together, if that is captured for God, there's hope for a nation. God says, let me show you something. Right here at the north door of the outer court are women weeping for Tammuz. Now what in the world is that? Around the world, fertility is worshipped. The ability to get children, to reproduce. It's fascinating that one of the problems we have in our ghettos today is that for young people, for the males, the ability to get a girl pregnant, nothing has changed in 5,000